So thank you for the exciting exchange before between Georgie and Seaman. So my name is Andia Swidi. I'll be your host for this session. I'm a member of the research team at the DealStreet Asia, where we are building a new data platform on private capital investment. And we also produce bi-weekly reports that tracks investment trends across the region, as well as a bit on China and India. So in this panel, we will be discussing how financial inclusion should, at least in theory, lead to healthcare inclusion. And I'm grateful to be joined by an exciting team of panelists, whom I'm sure our webinar attendees today are very familiar with. First, I would like to welcome Carmen Yuen. Hello, Carmen.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. She's a partner at Vertex Ventures. She has been with the company since 2014, overseeing dozens of investments across the region and beyond. And I look forward to learning from you, Carmen, today on how fintech inclusion could democratize healthcare in the region specifically. Next, we have Aditya Hadiputra. He's the currently principal at MDI Ventures, which is the CPC arm of Indonesia's largest mobile telecom company, Telkomsel, which has quite an extensive portfolio in fintech. And I believe MDI also is invested in, two of the largest health tech players in Indonesia. I'm talking about Halodoc and Alodokter. And we also have Michael Lentz. Michael has been a startup co-founder, investor, and mentor, obviously. He's currently a partner at Singapore-based venture capital firm Golden Gate Ventures. Some of you may be aware, from looking, from Michael's LinkedIn post recently. He was involved in a production of a documentary film that delves into systemic injustice that creates racial wealth gap. Of course, I haven't seen the film, but it sounds very interesting, Michael. I look forward to watching it. And last but not least, we have Gustav Agartsen, the only person in this panel, I believe, who, on a daily basis deal with the challenges of, making healthcare more accessible to the masses. So Gustav is the CEO of Milvik Bima, a company that he founded in Ghana back in 2010. Bima has always been focused on providing insurance and telemedicine services in emerging markets, which is very interesting. And Bima now operates in 9 markets, including in the region, in Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. So welcome to the panel, everyone. So without further ado, let's begin our round of discussion. And I want to start off with you, Gustav. So the topic of this session is, very close to me as someone who grew up in rural Indonesia. My father is a healthcare professional, and we move from town to town, as he gets new assignments every 4 years or so. And in the family, we often hear stories about how, patients cannot afford healthcare. They had to choose between healthcare and being poor. And this is Indonesia, in terms of access to healthcare is very challenging. And the pandemic itself has basically made this divide between those who are fortunate enough to access quality healthcare with those who don't become wider. But at the same time, the pandemic also has accelerated digitalization. This means more people are, having access to online healthcare service for the first time. And I imagine the change has been foundational. So as someone who deals with these issues, Gustav, how has the last 18 to 20 months shaped your company and your landscape basically?
Sure, thanks. And just to check, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. No. So yeah. First of all, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you look at across the markets where we operate, we have several hundred of millions of people who don't have access to healthcare, and I think what we have seen since the pandemic started, if you look back over the past 18 months, is that in general, people have become more kind of aware of and concerned by their health compared to before. And also referring back to what Simon said earlier, there's been a mindset shift. So we have seen that mindset shift among consumers, and as a result, we see very strong growth. So, for example, if you look at our direct-to-consumer offering, we've seen around 180% growth over the last year. And also, if you look among our customers and our existing customer base, some of them have had access to telemedicine for some time, but during the pandemic, they've seen that the utilization rate has doubled. And I think what we've also seen over the past 18 months is increased support from the government, and this was also mentioned earlier by Siemens, and we see exactly the same. They now fully realize the importance of telemedicine and how it is just critical for countries during a pandemic. So the support has increased, and it's much easier for us to collaborate with governments, and we're doing that across several of our markets, including Indonesia and Malaysia here in the region.
Does the support from government also means, in terms of regulation, does it get easier for companies such as yourself to penetrate markets in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that the government realized that it's going to be important to regulate telemedicine, and we encourage that. We think that's key going forward, and we want to work in partnership with the governments to create the right regulation. But what has also happened during a pandemic is that I think the governments have realized that we can't just create a plan to form regulation over the coming couple of years, right? When you're in the middle of a pandemic, you need something right away. So there's a sense of urgency there, and I think it has just accelerated things massively.
Yeah, when you talk about the government, there's the executive branch as well as the lawmakers. Have you had any exchange with the lawmakers where they are in terms of their awareness and their concern about how technology can actually improve access to healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, we are in constant contact with regulators across markets, and this has been our approach from the beginning. I mean, the business, as you mentioned earlier, started in Ghana, and we created the first telemedicine license in the country there, together with the regulator, and we've in close contact with the regulator in the Malaysia, and we're working together with them and providing our input on what regulation can look like going forward. And I also mentioned what we're doing in Indonesia. But if I look more in general, I think what's very positive for Bima and also other innovative businesses within kind of insurance and health tech is that actually fundamentally the government wants the same as we do. I mean, everyone is actually on the same page, right? We want financial inclusion, and we want people to have access to high quality healthcare. So we have the same goals, and then I think with the same goals, and if there is communication, then regulation can be shaped together, and that's what we're trying to do. And so far, from our experience, actually, in most of the countries where we operate, the regulators are open to have a dialogue, and ultimately they want to move in the same direction as us.
Thanks, Gustav. So let me move on to our investor panelists here. So, Kaman, as an investor, how has the past 18 to 20 months changed your investment thesis, and particularly how that touches on access to healthcare these days? Do you see more allocation? Are you expecting more allocation going forward?
Right. Thanks. So actually, healthcare as a vertical, we feel that it has always been waiting for disruption. In Vertex perspective, we look at healthcare as both an enterprise solution space as well as it straddles into the consumer internet space. But having said that, healthcare also touches very much into the fintech space. So these are the three verticals that we look at. Now, COVID actually accelerated the entire process of this healthcare being pending disruption, right? And we have been looking into the healthcare space. The thing is that in 2020, we actually invested into three, not because it's COVID, but because we happen to have taken time to evaluate and therefore we descended on three. The things that we were looking at includes like telemedicine, teleconsultation, health and fitness, apps, even the front end of customer relationships management that Simat mentioned earlier on. So we descended on three companies. In terms of, like I mentioned about how healthcare and fintech, they do overlap. Fintech enablers will be the offshoot, right, of healthcare. They will include things like Bima, which is in the insurtech space, the installment payment model, which is like consult now and pay later types of models. And for Vertex, during this period of time, we actually invested into a digital insurer, a full stack digital insurer, also known as Sunday Insurance. You will probably read about it very soon. Yeah. The company is actually based in Thailand. And other than that, we also invested into a platform that enables digital lending. The company is Tinky Lender. And a number of their clients are actually in the healthcare financing space. Now back to healthcare. The three companies that we invested into, one of them is in Singapore, it's called SweetDoc, which is an on-demand doctor service. The other two are in India. IVF Access, as the name implies, is for in vitro fertilization for couples. And the third one is IU Health, which is actually the front-end customer experience company in India. But going beyond that, we will continue to look for opportunities in this space, in the three spaces.
Okay, so when reviewing, potential investment in fintech and health tech, let's just focus on fintech for now. Like, how does the issue of access of healthcare, factor into your assessment? And are there any new revelations during the pandemic that that wasn't obvious before, that may help you, in making better decision when investing in fintech?
So healthcare and fintech, they overlap, right? Or rather, they are very continuum. What we notice is in Southeast Asia, the use of wallets, digital wallets, is already very prevalent, right? So what we notice is actually instead of using things that are relatively fancy, one of the companies that I've noticed, which is actually also in the blockchain, you pay with currencies, cryptocurrencies, or there's unique tokens, and they claim that they have got pretty global coverage. Softcare, some of you may already be aware. But I think that is a little bit sophisticated and maybe less necessary, because healthcare, while we can say it is global, because all of us are susceptible to similar illnesses, yet it is also pretty local, given the regulations, etc. A Singapore doctor cannot practice in Canada. Similarly, a Malaysian doctor cannot practice in Singapore, right? Unless you have gotten the necessary certification. So as a result, much as we would like it to be global, there's also a certain local context. And given that there's local context, then it's how do you make payment for it? In Singapore, we are quite comfortable paying using credit card, maybe using DBS transfer, whatever. But in the region where credit cards are less well entrenched, then it's about using wallets to make payment. Or if not, it is about the consult now, pay later model, right? So I think that would be the model going forward.
I want to turn to Indonesia, Mas Aditya. So if we are talking about democratizing access to healthcare, this has a lot to do with empowering people, right? I mean, whether financially or through dissemination of knowledge. And obviously, Indonesia is such a vast country, and different set of challenges, obviously, compared to other markets in Southeast Asia. What are some of the innovations that you see is working in Indonesia when it comes to opening up more access to fintech and healthcare?
Yeah, I think on the healthcare side, I think we know that two of pretty huge telemedicine company are continue to grow, but we're not investing in just those two, but also the new up and coming telemedicine company like Prixa, for example. But I think overall, what's the catalyst or the tailwind that kind of naturally push telemedicine category forward? I think I agree with the notions that been mentioned before, that we as a country and a region itself suffers from some problems like low number of doctors, low number of beds, and then obviously lower quality of care as opposed to large country like the US and China. And then even in terms of insurance, because one of our sister companies, Medica, is actually the largest TPA in the country. We know that there's actually less than 6 million healthcare policyholders in Indonesia. So that means the penetration is still very low. And even if they opt to the government insurance, BPJS, it still has a lot of issues. Like it continues to pile up government debts, and it leads to more problems in the future. So I think the innovations that comes to bridge this gap are essentially the healthcare tech companies, and then also potentially the insurtech company, but not limited to that. I think it's good that Carmen mentions on the fintech side of it, the pay later kind of thing, because that's also one of the things that we've been working on together with companies like Credivo in our portfolio to be able to work with Medica as a TPA. Like for example, even if people are covered by insurance, they still have to pay the excess of their claims of the insurance. And this is an issue as opposed to countries like, for example, as major as US, where you eventually will be able to send out the bill later to their home. But in Indonesia, if you don't settle the bill, I think even the hospital wouldn't let you to go out of the hospital until you're really able to settle the bills. And this is a much more bigger problems when you're coming from the middle low kind of economy. So these are the types of innovations that could come to bridge that gap. And telemedicine's also really helpful in terms of bridging what the infrastructure currently lacking. So trying to bridge the gap between the low doctors, the low beds, and then the lower care quality. Yeah.
In regards to that, the low number of healthcare professionals, is Indonesia open to foreign talents? I mean, to play a role in that, meaning foreign doctors from neighboring countries, from Malaysia, Singapore. What's the regulation there?
Yes, I think we've been actively exploring about that options as well, and if regulations, given that regulations permit, again we see regulations as a part of the support of the growth of the whole ecosystem. But I think even our at Medica, the TPA sister company is looking to possibly onboard like overseas doctors to bridge this gap. At the very least, maybe starting as a more like second opinion kind of options to the telemedicine services. As we also need to be aware that this whole telemedicine and teleconsultations are also slightly sitting in the gray area in a way that how do we know for sure that the doctors on the other side are not suggesting or prescribing something that we're not supposed to consume. So these are the gray area that we're carefully trading on.
Right. Very interesting. I want to highlight a few numbers to give some context in terms of how the investment landscape has changed during the pandemic. So we collect investment data and we do a quarterly review, right? So our data on health tech in particular was, we identify that this vertical is the third most active in Southeast Asia in terms of deal volume. last year. So in terms of value, at least 283 million of fresh capital were raised, by homegrown startups. The activity is even greater this year. The first 6 months alone, we saw roughly about 400 million being invested in health tech. And just last week alone, we noted there were more than 100 million invested. I mean, this is based on announcement and corporate filings, right? So I want to move on to you, Michael. As an investor, can you give us, some context to better understand this growth in funding? What does it say about the development of health tech in the region? Because we're kind of getting mixed information about how the impact of the pandemic itself. Some argue it has, companies claim to have grown so much, but some investors tell us, the pandemic doesn't really give you that boost. So if you can give us an insight into that.
Yeah, and Andy, thanks, and thanks for having me on the panel. It does give a bit of a skewed sense, because we did some similar analysis on the fintech space, and I think we've never seen the increase of funding for fintech companies as we've seen in the first half of this year. And if you kind of drill down a bit more on the data, you can also look at sort of what are the bigger companies that have received the bulk of this of this capital. I think one thing that is very interesting, and I want to jump back quickly to a point that Carmen made earlier on the wellness space. So one thing that we have seen over the past few months, more than ever, is that startups in the wellness space have picked up more and more coming from Southeast Asia, and we've seen this big boom in the US and partially in Europe as well, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to sports tech, when it comes to sort of overall wellness. Funny enough, we had an internal discussion about, does pricing for these markets also kind of make sense for markets in emerging markets, such as Indonesia, where you might have a monthly subscription on a nutrition plan, which would cost you between $20 to $50 a month, which is not accustomed to, for a certain demographic. So I do think there is a pickup, but for me, there's also kind of a big disparity between what sits on the upper end, which is called wellness, people that might be affluent, have larger disposable incomes, versus not a demographic with less disposable income. I think the one thing that I would like to mention, which is it's not a new trend, but I think the digitization of it is relatively new, is the earned wage access. I think that is going to be helpful, kind of pushing healthcare to this demographic forward more. We're seeing this trend in Vietnam, where more and more employees are opting for getting their salary paid earlier, and this kind of helps their living environment. It helps their social impact, and I think that's a trend we're going to see continue in terms of digitization in Indonesia as well, and hopefully that's going to help at least seeing more companies within the healthcare space sort of accessing that. And I think that the second thing is that we tend to look at healthcare as the telemedicine part and the digital health side. I would be extremely interested to see, I'd say, more happening on developments, within the hospitals, sort of actual care, whether it's elderly care, whether it's disease prevention, whether it's data analytics for prevention as well. And I think that's where we still have a big gap and a big role to play in the region.
Great, thanks so much. Since we're talking about the variety of business models out there, Gustav, I want to get back to you. I'm intrigued by your model, which is, I think, not too common here, in the sense that Bima started off as a life and health insurance provider, right? And from the beginning, you've tried to tackle issue of payments through partnership with telco companies, so that premiums can be paid using prepaid vouchers or postpaid monthly bills, right? And the company expanded into delivering telemedicine services and other healthcare. So this means you're managing two entirely sort of like different business, right, under one roof. One is fintech and the other is healthcare. with two different sets of challenges, right? I'm interested to know, since you're fairly, later coming to Southeast Asia, I'm interested to know, based on your model, what are some of the lessons learned from other markets like in Ghana or in Tanzania that you find applicable here? And equally, what are some of the things that are completely new to you that require a completely different approach?
Thank you, Andy. So as you say, we're basically sitting in the middle in a sense, right? On one hand, we are integrating historically with telcos, but now less with telcos and more with the mobile wallet providers.
Yeah.
And that's how we collect our monthly premiums. Our products are subscription products. So people subscribe and we collect premiums monthly. So that's what we have on one hand. And on the other hand, we have our health platform offering, which, as you say, started with insurance. We started with life insurance, and then we evolved into health insurance, and now also telemedicine and other health services. I think there are a couple of trends that are enabling this business model. And if we look at, coming back to your question around what can we leverage from what we learned in the early days in Ghana, what can be leveraged now in South and Southeast Asia? So the whole mobile wallet trend, as I think everyone knows, started in Kenya with Safaricom. And one of the biggest trends that we see across all the markets where we operate is the growth of the mobile wallets. And we saw, for example, last year, I think the number of active wallets grew with like 70% in Indonesia, and we see the same trend everywhere. And we're convinced that this growth will definitely continue. And what happens is that in the beginning, people sign up for these wallets, and you have a number of, or increasing number of active wallets. But then over time, as people start to trust these wallets more, they're also starting to actually keep their salary in these wallets, and then you can build use cases on top of that, like we are doing when we're offering people to pay for their insurance and health services. So the fact that the wallets are growing, that's a key enabler for a company like Bima. And we are convinced that the fact that the wallets are growing rapidly across all of the market will also enable people to access insurance and health services. What we can do by integrating with these wallets is to create a frictionless way for people to pay. They subscribe once, and then we collect premiums on a monthly recurring basis. And there's a certain logic to how you do that. You need the technology in place to integrate with the wallets, but then you also need to structure payments in the way, break it down into installments so that you can collect successfully and to enable people to actually complete their payments. Thanks to that, we started in Africa, we could early on integrate with the mobile wallets there, and we can now leverage those learnings as we have expanded to South and Southeast Asia. So that's one area. And then the other area is on our actual product offering. And I think this was mentioned earlier as well. You can't really look at telemedicine as just one service, and then you give people access to doctors over phone, and then you solve the health needs, right? It's more complex than that. And what we're really trying to achieve is that we want to personalize the experience for customers. And by collecting data from consumers, we can suggest access to products and access to service and proactive treatment so that they can manage their health outcome. And that's something that we have, that experience is something that we gradually build up in Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. So now when we're, for example, expanding our business in Indonesia, we are one of the first providers who are integrating with the wallet so we can collect premiums on a recurring basis. And we can leverage our experience from Africa and South Asia when doing that. But we can also leverage our experience from building up our product portfolio with a combination of life, health insurance, telemedicine, access to home delivery of medicine and other health services. And we can take that product offering, collect data from consumers, and then personalize what they experience in terms of our products and services. And I think that's going to be key going forward, not only for Bima but for other providers in this space, to make sure that we're relevant for consumers based on their individual needs.
So in Africa, you rely a lot on the role of agents, right, as a point of access for customers. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, is this agents that are exist somewhere in other countries, or these are like the insurance agents that we are familiar of, like in Southeast Asia, house moms or dads can be agents by offering to their friends. And what sort of model are you doing here?
A bit different from that, but I think also first thing to say is that all our processes from the beginning have been digitalized. So the whole idea behind Bima was to leverage mobile technology, remove all paperwork. People should be able to subscribe through their phone and pay through their phone. So that's been our approach from start. But what we have also realized is that actually a majority of our consumers in the emerging middle class, they're buying insurance and getting access to healthcare for the first time. And they actually value speaking to someone, to have their questions answered and have someone who can educate them around how insurance actually works, right? So what we have seen, in order to scale, if we can digitalize processes on one hand, but also offer consumers to either subscribe themselves or to speak to one of our sales associates who can help them to subscribe. We want to offer our products and services to both categories of customers. Those are smartphone users who have bought insurance before, used telemedicine before. They just go on this phone and subscribe, right? But we also want to offer those who are buying for the first time to get that level of education. So that's been key for us. But also coming back to your question around how do we look at agents and how do we compare to others? What we have are actually full-time employees who are dedicated on working with Bima. They typically receive a fixed component of salary and a variable component of their salary. And the reason for that is that we can monitor quality. That's absolute key for us. And we can't afford to have mis-selling going on. So what we do is that we have people that are trained to sell our products. We monitor their quality of sales, and if that quality goes down, then they go back into retraining. And by doing that, we've been able to scale and maintaining a high level of customer education.
All right. Thanks for that, Gustav. So I want to touch on more on payments, because I simply see, electronic payments and the lack of access towards e-payment is quite a big stumbling block for deepening healthcare in Southeast Asia, basically. And so I'm wondering, am I overestimating the role of e-payments here? As you know, I mean, most people in Southeast Asia still receive their earning in cash, and conversion is a challenge, right? And that's why companies such as Indomaret and Alfamart, if you're aware, one of the larger convenience store in Indonesia, serve as a point of conversion, from cash to digital. And I think that's going to be big in the next few years, right? So, Kaman, if you can, give us some insight how e-payments will develop in Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Actually, our region is pretty cash heavy, right? So and like I mentioned earlier on, the penetration of banking services and card services is actually quite low. But with the COVID, I think things have actually changed. They don't have a choice. People just have to move forward. But previously, we invested in a company called PayFast, similar to what you were mentioning about Alfamart. These are people who are actually mobile agents, right? Alfamart, you still have to go to those retail points and you convert cash into digital amounts in your wallet. Whereas for the PayFast, they are actually agents that could be in your village, in the second, third, fourth tier cities, and they primarily do the same function that the Alfamarts are doing. So I do see that going forward, e-wallets will dominate, microcredits will dominate, and like what Michael Lynn was saying earlier on, the earned wage access, it will dominate. And similar to Golden Gate, we have been seeing different propositions for EWA, not just only in Indonesia, but also in the other Southeast Asia region. We do notice that agents play a very important part, and that they are the people in the community, right? They are the walking retail points to enable wallets to be topped up. And if we are going to take a leaf from China, right, digital payment is second nature. And I see this happening even in Southeast Asia. I have different instances where I have left my wallet, which is already very thin and very flat, at home. And I'm like, okay, fine, I will do without my wallet. But no way, the moment I left my phone at home, I turn around and come back and pick up my phone because it's necessary, right? My MRT is loaded there. My credit cards are all loaded on my phones, etc. So the use of wallet is very well entrenched in our lives, right? So, and in Southeast Asia, we have got multiple wallets, to be fair. But I believe we probably have got one real dominant wallet, and maybe a second one that we will use occasionally, and a far, far away number 3 or 4, if at all. I do expect to see more neobanks. Digital banks will come up, and some of these neobanks will probably become our third, fourth wallet players because they will want to be specialized for dedicated groups of users, right? Be it youths, be it teens. We are also seeing proposition for teens neobanks players, for mothers, for musicians, whatever you cut it. And I will see that this will become a parallel universe to the days of credit cards, where you have got ladies cards, you have got platinum cards. This will become the dedicated virtual cards, wallets for users. And users will have the flexibility of moving their funds between wallets. Whichever one that gives them better promotion, they will use those wallets. So I do see that going forward, even when it comes to teleconsultation, even paying a real doctor that comes to our premise, or even paying for insurance, it will be done primarily over digital wallets. I do see that happening.
Thanks, Carmen. Michael, how do you see in terms of Southeast Asia's trajectory for payments? Are we going to be, somewhat following China's footsteps, or India, or any observation that you think relevant to share?
Yeah, and it might be weird for me saying this as a VC, but we shouldn't underestimate the power of actual cash. For anyone who has been in Europe in the past 3 years, if you go to Germany, a lot of the payments, unbelievably, are still happening in cash. Even similar to the US. I do feel that for us to make digital payments work across the region, we need the innovation that we already see in the companies. But similar to Vertex, similar to MDI, we are already backing a large number of payments companies or companies that are in the digital wallet space. I think the other element is that you'll need support from large institutions, and whether it's governments, whether it's real estate owners that allow you to pay your rent through a digital wallet, whether it's hospitals that allow you to pay your bill, or whether it's utility companies. So it takes more than just amazing founders to build a company. You kind of need more of an infrastructure to be able to integrate digital payments within your life. So I'm very bullish, still very bullish on payments in general, and I do think that we'll see a lot of progression over the next few years. But I'm also very aware of we need more than just those amazing founders building these companies. You need an infrastructure. If I'm not able to integrate digital payments in my daily life, it's never going to take off. And I'm still going to be reliant on larger companies allowing me to use those digital payments. And I think that's the condition for it to become successful.
Yep. Thanks for that, Michael. Something interesting just come up in Indonesia recently. Mas Aditya, I want to get to you on this one. So the Indonesia Central Bank is considering, actually they've been considering for quite some time, and they recently made an announcement that they will adopt digital currencies. So knowing that cash is still prevalent and most people still comfortable using it, first of all, what sort of time frame that we should be looking at when it comes to digital rupiah, right? And well, it seems inevitable, are we gonna, how in terms of acceptance and penetration, right? What's gonna happen, you think?
Yeah, I think this is a very huge topic because I mean it touched very country level kind of decision to push digital currencies. But I think looking at the outlook, I mean I heard of the plan on the news, and to be frank, I see it happening in 5 to 10 years kind of time frame. But I think what we have seen since the beginning of pandemic is also what uniquely we don't quite expect before, which is like a very massive surge of crypto kind of adoptions. So this immediately opens up people perceptions about cryptocurrency, as opposed to how it compares to the fiat currency and then the digital payment. And I think uniquely seeing Indonesia's I mean wealth management space is also kind of taking off a lot during the pandemic, right? Because people kind of stays at home, then they realize, oh, I get extra assets or disposable income that I previously spent it all on the mall, and now it sits on my account. So just put it on the stock market, and then new stocks kind of emerge, tech stocks. People get excited about it. But I think on the crypto side, uniquely, we have seen, I think I read a couple of days ago on the news that Indonesia actually have more crypto investors as opposed to the retail investors. So this is actually a massive improvement that happens in less than 2 years. So if the governments intend to push something like digital currency agenda, it might actually happen faster than 5 years if people awareness keep growing at this rate. And I think it's really disruptive to the whole financial ecosystem as well, because we're looking on the banking space. A lot of opportunities that or the margins that they take is actually on the fees, right? And a lot of transactions that happens on these digital currencies sort of happen with little to no fees, depending on the types of infrastructures where you walk on. But the whole idea of digital currency is actually to make this whole thing much more efficient. Transactions can happen like 24/7 more seamlessly with less fees. I think it would unlock a lot of opportunities, because I think when we're looking at the fintech functions in general, it starts with like payment, and then savings, lending, then goes to insurance. So I think if people starts to find the use case on the payment, slowly people will find the use case, and eventually it gets to the insurance.
Right. Thanks, Aditya. So part and parcel to fintech adoption, conversion of cash into digital is basically data, right? Like we create data, more and more data, and we have more data today than we did say 5 years ago, thanks to the tech startups and thanks to the digitalization of transaction. So digitalization has allowed for greater access to data, right? Having more data means that insurance companies can manage risk better, and perhaps adopt the dynamically adjusted premiums as opposed to conventional static premiums. So I want to go to Gustav. Has the adoption of technology made premiums much lower, and how disruptive has InsurTech been against the more traditional players right now? Can you share your insight into this?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I mean, first of all, to say, yeah, data collection will be absolute key, and the opportunity that we see is in collecting data from consumers to make our product offering more relevant to them. And I think at the same time, while that's a massive opportunity, I think we also must be very careful around how we use the data. So if consumers trust us with their health data, like they're doing now, right? I mean, they contact our doctors and they share information with them. Then we must also be extremely careful around how we use that data. And if we're not, then I don't think it will be possible for a company to provide both insurance services and also, for example, telemedicine services. I think that's something just to be very aware of. But what we definitely can do is to collect the information about consumers so that we can propose products that are relevant to them. And I think that by offering not only insurance but also health services, create an opportunity to do that. And if we have relevant information about consumers, I mean, we can make insurance affordable. We've proven that we can do that. And we mentioned earlier, with the emerging middle class now starting to use the wallets and trust the wallets and keep their salaries on the wallets, we have an opportunity to sell policies to people that haven't had access to them before, and charge a monthly fee of between like maybe $5 and $20 and above, right? But for some people that's not affordable, and we're not excluding them as well, right? So we have policies that cost around 50 cents per month, and we can make that work as well. Those can also be profitable customers for a company like Bima. So even the lowest income segments, we can provide them with insurance. And what's enabling that is that we reached scale. So we have the capability, we have the insurance policies there, and we have the telemedicine set up. And then by adjusting cover levels, we can get the premiums down to those levels. And this is also possible, again, thanks to that we now have the mobile wallets. Customers can subscribe once and then pay on a monthly basis going forward. And then the economics work out, even if you see these lower premium levels, sub $1 a month. So yeah, again, this evolution of mobile wallets is really creating opportunity to provide insurance to the vast majority of the population.
Andy, if I could just add on, because we have invested into Sunday Insurance, right? And they also have the capability of underwriting. So they also run their models. We did go through with them on the question of premium and how why is it that they are able to provide such a competitive rate to the premium? It is less, I mean, the function of data is important, but actually for the incumbents, where the bulk of their premium goes towards actually is also distribution, right? So Bima is tech run, so that's why you don't have that many people to serve. So in the incumbent way, the premium that is collected has to serve a plethora of people, from the agents to the claims departments to the actuaries, and also to ensure they can cover claims. So the digital insurer like Sunday Insurance, Bima, they do their own underwriting. And the way I understand it is they would have streamlined the need for that many big room office of people. And so that actually helps them to lower their expense. And then in terms of the way they do their pricing, because they manage their models, they are actually in a better position to reprice and to tweak the product offerings in a much shorter time while they maintain their margins. So in that whole process, they make sure that the way they price their products is sufficient to cover a certain portion of the expenses that they will need, and the balance they can actually pass it on to the consumers as cost savings, and hence that translates to lower premium. But of course, at the end of the day, if their models do not work, then they are definitely not in the money. Yeah.
Right. Michael, anything to add to that in terms of the models at work?
No, definitely. I agree with Gustav and Carmen. I just want to, so one interesting debate that I always have with my friends in the US is how do you prevent that you don't discriminate against age, gender, if someone had health conditions? I think there's a lot of good coming from data, but there's also an inherent challenge of how do you make sure that it remains fair. Yeah. Again, so I think it's a challenge that is solvable, but it's always a very interesting debate on the positive end of data we definitely see, but there's an inherent risk to it as well.
Great, thanks for that, Michael. So slightly related to the topic of data, right? In Southeast Asia, we have major custodians of data, if you will. You know, I'm talking about the large tech ecosystem created by the super platforms, right? I'm talking about the Goto, and talking about Grab and C and whatnot. And so all these companies, they have their own ambitions in terms of fintech and health tech as well. So um, you know they invest in companies that that can be a part of their own ecosystem. So my question is, how does such a competitive landscape, in Southeast Asia, you think influence the strategy of, a smaller independent companies? Maybe Mas Aditya can give us your insight first.
Yeah, I think the fact that we also uniquely a region which has multiple super app that kind of
Yeah.
coexist between each other. I think it's still an opportunity. Say for example, I think both of the giants like GoTo and Grab continues to open up their ecosystem to the smaller players to fill in the gap, because it's not like they could cover everything by themselves. And I mean, we've seen large corporates like Facebook and Google tries to handle things. I mean, setting up their specific divisions and charging a hat, maybe it's specific to healthcare space and all that. But I think it's much more efficient and de-risking kind of effort to partner with the smaller guys instead, because the smaller player actually are really focused. I mean, typically startups focus on a very specific problem and solutions that they try to solve for the consumer, right? So I think this is a field where it continues to be an opportunity for venture capitals to find and actually finance this company, so it can emerge and capture larger value in the creations of solving that specific problems. And then even though we're living in the tech era, it kind of happens in cycle. Like all these companies eventually bump into another problems where it can be solved by the smaller players. So I think this the very idea of disruption and innovation kind of keeps happening inevitably.
Michael, do you see this competing ecosystem? Do you see any scope for, say, an independent player? Not having to choose, to belong to this ecosystem. Did you see that?
Yeah, always ongoing debate between VCs and founders, I guess. I mean, I would say the one thing we shouldn't forget is that all these big companies, and it doesn't matter if it's GoTo or Grab or Lazada or Traveloka, Bukalapak, they also have an educational purpose. They work with their own ecosystem, and it could be an ecosystem of merchants. So these merchants are slowly digitizing, and they're using different services. They're using invoice financing. They're using lending services. So to me, it's called an ecosystem for a reason, that there are different components that actually make it work. And yeah, I mean, some companies tend to work with one of the big players, and it excludes working with another. And I think that's fine, because that's what happens in economies. But for me, the way I've seen it over the past years is a lot of spin-outs have come from sort of these big super apps, and whether it's a specific niche company, whether it's early employers that decide to venture out on their own, it actually helped continue the ecosystem. And moreover, I think what it has done is it has kind of put Southeast Asia on the map as well. I think without having these large companies showcasing what is possible in the region, it would have been very difficult kind of to build the next wave of companies. So overall, there's competition, of course there's exclusion, but overall I'm very positive of having these sort of almost conglomerates as part of our ecosystem.
Okay. Gustav, as a player, I mean, as a startup, basically, how do you see this? Do you have to choose between ecosystems, or do you see value by staying independent?
No, I think we definitely see the big tech ecosystems as an opportunity. I mean, and the way we look at it is that we think that we can leverage them as payment platforms, and we don't think that they will, or actually that they are now, nor will in the future be completely exclusive. Yes, if you want to have arrangements with them along the lines of doing co-branded products or having, you know, data sharing arrangement, then you probably have to pick one to work with. But we see a massive opportunity in actually staying independent from them, but still benefit from them being ecosystems. And I think this goes to what Michael said earlier as well, that if you really want to build an ecosystem, then you can't just be very selective and say that, okay, I'm going to work with one company per industry and then no one else. If you're going to build a payment platform and be the leading payment platform in a country like Indonesia, for example, then I think you also have to be open. And that's where we see the opportunity being. What we're doing, I think, will be complementary to what they're doing with selective partner through exclusive arrangements. And what we want to do is to establish Bima as an independent brand in the market, and we own our own customer data, and then we leverage all the payment platforms that are available in the countries. So that's our view.
Great, thanks. Any quick thoughts on that? Maybe want to comment?
Yeah, thank you. So I will add on to what Michael has said, right? So even the super apps, they came out in the face of competing giants during their time, and yet they were able to find a niche for themselves and build out that ecosystem, right? And while they seem formidable, they seem like they have covered everything. Yet because they are such a super app, they cannot be laser focused on any one thing. So they provide 1-2 things really good, and the rest of the things is like, okay, can do. So even for Grab, I use Grab for travel. I use Grab for food delivery. I will not use Grab for insurance. I will not use Grab for shopping, for mart, right? So they are good, but they try to cover all grounds, but they are not the best. So will there be companies that can come up behind them? For sure. So for example, Alibaba was a dominant player, and yet Pinduoduo came out from somewhere in the backyards, right? And then what happened was Pinduoduo suddenly brought in a whole new wave trend on social commerce, group buying, etc. So they created a new wave. So in the same fashion, I see that while we have got incumbents, startups do not necessarily need to fear them. There is definitely areas, but we just have to look hard and be better than them. For all you know, the startups could be the ones starting a new trend.
Great. Thanks, Carmen. So we're moving closer to the end of our session. Let me bring a couple of questions from the audience. The first one is from anonymous attendees. So the question is about Philippines specifically. You know, when it comes to health tech, why is the Philippines being ignored? Everything is Vietnam and Indonesia. Some investors are saying that telemedicine and health tech startups did not. Okay, let's just stop there. I mean, why there's little attention on Philippines? Michael, Aditya, Carmen, go ahead. I mean, any one of you want to start first?
I'll give a very brief answer from our end. I think there's a lot of attention for the Philippines, but you also have to realize that for investors, whether it's VCs or angel investors, deal flow is crucial. The number of deals determine how active an ecosystem is. And between ourselves, Vertex, our peers in the market, we've been tracking the Philippines, I think for the past 10 years, done deals. We feel that the Philippines is reemerging as a startup ecosystem. We're seeing more signals that more companies are coming out. More companies are coming to Singapore to fundraise. More companies are looking for collaborations. We're seeing more companies in Indonesia looking to expand to the Filipino market as well. So for me, it's a matter of timing, and sometimes timing needs to be more patient, and sometimes things happen faster. I think we'll see a wave of healthcare companies coming out of the Philippines. It is just lagging behind markets such as Indonesia and Vietnam that had a different timing. So I'm not too concerned. And believe me, I know that all of our peers are looking at the Filipino market very, very closely.
Mas Aditya, is MDI looking at Philippines, or are you just focused?
If I may add, which is it was sort of coincidence that we actually have one Philippine companies in our portfolio, and it just happens to be in healthcare space, which is Clinica. And it's actually one of the very first batch of MDI's investments in 2016. But the development is that we've seen is Clinica business actually grown in Indonesia much faster than it is in Philippines. So I think I kind of agree with what Michael said. It's a matter of timing. So I think multiple factors kind of play between whether the ecosystem could grow as fast as opposed to the other country. But if we're going purely by numbers, why growth could happen much faster in Indonesia is purely by populations. Like it's comparing the numbers of Indonesians as opposed to the neighboring countries. But I also agree to what Michael said. It's not like things cannot grow in Philippines. In fact, we're seeing some other unique companies emerging out of Philippines. Something that we don't expect from the other countries. So it's just comes down to the ecosystem, how it develops, and then the behavior and the cultures of the people really plays a lot to influence the tailwind of such a company to grow.
Great. Gustav, what sort of numbers you're seeing in Philippines? You're operating there, right?
Yeah, so Philippines is one of our smaller markets, but we have established now the right local partnerships that we need, and we're building up the team. So going forward, we're quite bullish on Philippines as a market, and we think that there will be a lot of opportunity there going forward, even if we haven't seen maybe the same momentum there as in Indonesia over the past couple of years. But going forward, we see a lot of potential in Philippines.
Great. I'm going to move on to a second question from our audience. What is the next area of healthcare that the VCs are betting on, and why? What potential do you see for medtech in Southeast Asia? I think Kaman can take this one.
Right. Okay. Next thing in healthcare. So what has Vertex invested into? We have invested into a platform on demand doctors, nurses, which also doubles up with telemedicine. We have done IVF access services. We have also done the CRM customer experience of going into different hospitals in India. The next big thing that we are looking at going into, and which is actually the whole who owns your data. So that piece is a little bit hard to crack. We have seen medical records is currently being owned by the institutions that you consult with, be it clinics, be it hospitals. It is not your own to own at the moment. How can we shift that such that the ownership becomes yours? When do we start it? Is it going to be one where starting from baby, when they are born, then we can start building it up? Or do we start midway and build backwards? So at the moment, we haven't quite seen any companies doing that. But at the end of the day, we are strong believers that we ought to own the data at our end, such that when we see a doctor, we are showing them who has consulted with us, what were some of the early indications, what were the diagnoses given, without having to seek consent from the hospital to share with us those data. So currently, we are looking for opportunities in that space. Why is it important? Because ultimately, that data is yours and yours to own. Even for insurance companies, they only see whatever that I've bought from them, whatever that I've claimed from them. They still do not have a 360 view of me. It's only I who have got that insight and that view of myself. So we are looking into that space.
Sorry, Andy, I think you're muted.
Muted there. Yeah. So guys, I think we have arrived at the end of our session. Thank you so much, everyone. Kaman, Gustav, Michael, Aditya. Wishing you good health, and I'll be speaking to you soon again.
Thank you
so
much.
Thank you.